The orphan boy's fingers moved across the guitar strings, playing Cracklin Rosie, when a stranger stopped to listen. What happened in the next 60 seconds changed this homeless child's life forever. You're about to discover how one song performed on a dirty street corner brought Neil Diamond himself face to face with a kid who had nothing. And what the legendary musician did next will restore your faith in humanity. This orphan boy went from sleeping in shelters to something nobody could have predicted. And it all started with those first few chords of Cracklin Rosie. 12-year-old Marcus Johnson sat on the corner of Fifth Avenue and Broadway in New York City with a battered acoustic guitar that was missing 2 strings. This orphan boy had been living in the foster care system since he was 6 years old, bouncing between 7 different homes in 6 years. Nobody wanted to keep Marcus long-term because he was quiet, withdrawn, and spent all his time with that old guitar instead of connecting with the families trying to help him. The orphan boy ran away from his last foster home 3 weeks ago and had been surviving on the streets ever since, playing music for spare change and sleeping in subway stations when security wasn't watching. Marcus learned to play guitar from his biological father before the man died in a construction accident when Marcus was 5. His mother had abandoned them when he was just a baby, so when his father passed away, this orphan boy entered the system with nothing but memories and that guitar. Every family that took him in told Marcus to focus on school, on sports, on normal kid activities, but the orphan boy only wanted to play music. It was the only connection he had left to the father he barely remembered. So Marcus practiced every single day, teaching himself songs by ear from listening to street musicians and radio stations playing through store windows. On this particular afternoon in late September, Marcus decided to play Cracklin Rosie because he had heard it earlier that morning coming from a vintage record shop. The orphan boy didn't know much about Neil Diamond, didn't know the song was a massive hit from 1970, didn't know it meant something special to millions of people around the world. Marcus just knew the melody was beautiful and the chords were simple enough for his 4-string guitar to handle. The orphan boy started playing, his small fingers finding the notes despite the missing strings, his young voice singing the lyrics he had memorized after hearing them just twice. People walked past without stopping. This was New York City, where street performers were everywhere, and most pedestrians had learned to ignore them completely. Marcus didn't care. The orphan boy wasn't playing for the crowd or the money, though he desperately needed both. He played because music was the only thing that made him feel connected to something bigger than his painful reality. The orphan boy closed his eyes and let the song pour out of him, singing about sweet times and good times and Cracklin Rosie getting him high. He had no idea what the lyrics really meant, but he felt the emotion behind them. Across the street, a man in his 70s wearing sunglasses, a baseball cap, and a casual jacket had stopped walking. Neil Diamond was in New York for exactly 3 hours between flights, taking a rare walk through the city alone without handlers or security. The legendary musician heard something that made him freeze in his tracks. Someone was playing Cracklin Rosie, one of his most beloved songs, but the voice singing it was young and raw, and filled with something Neil Diamond recognized immediately, because he had felt it himself decades ago: pure emotion, real pain, authentic longing for something better. Neil Diamond crossed the street and stood about 15 feet away from the orphan boy, watching this child perform his song with a sincerity that most professional musicians never achieve. Marcus kept his eyes closed, completely unaware that one of the most successful recording artists in history was listening to every note. The orphan boy reached the chorus, and his voice cracked slightly on the high notes, but he pushed through it with determination that made Neil Diamond's throat tighten with emotion. This kid was performing like his life depended on it, and Neil Diamond suspected that maybe it did. When Marcus finished the song, he opened his eyes and saw an older man standing closer now, just a few feet away, smiling with tears visible even behind the sunglasses. The orphan boy recognized something familiar about the stranger's face but couldn't place it. Marcus nervously asked if the man wanted to request a song. Neil Diamond pulled off his sunglasses and baseball cap, and the orphan boy's mouth fell open in shock. Even a 12-year-old living on the streets knew who Neil Diamond was. His music played everywhere. His face had been on magazine covers and television screens for 50 years. Neil Diamond asked Marcus where he learned to play Cracklin Rosie. The orphan boy stammered out that he heard it that morning and liked how it sounded. Neil Diamond asked where Marcus lived, where his parents were, why he was playing guitar on a street corner on a Thursday afternoon instead of being in school. The orphan boy hesitated, scared that telling the truth might get him in trouble, might send him back to foster care, might take away the little bit of freedom he had found living on the streets. But something about Neil Diamond's kind eyes made Marcus tell the whole story. The legendary musician listened without interrupting as this orphan boy explained about his dead father, his absent mother, the 7 foster homes, running away, sleeping in subway stations, and surviving on whatever money people dropped in his guitar case. Neil Diamond asked Marcus to play another song, any song he wanted. The orphan boy chose Sweet Caroline, another Neil Diamond classic he had learned from street performers. Marcus played it beautifully despite the missing strings, his voice gaining confidence as Neil Diamond nodded along and even sang a few lines with him. When the song ended, Neil Diamond made a decision that would change everything. The legendary musician told Marcus that talent like his was too precious to waste on street corners and subway stations. Neil Diamond said this orphan boy deserved a real chance to develop his gift, to get an education, to have stability and support and people who believed in him. The orphan boy listened with hope and fear battling in his chest, wondering what this famous stranger could possibly do to help a homeless kid that the entire foster care system had already given up on. Neil Diamond pulled out his phone and made 3 calls right there on that street corner. First, he called his personal attorney and explained the situation, asking what legal steps were necessary to help this child. Second, he called a prestigious music school in Manhattan that he had donated to for years, describing Marcus's talent and asking if they had space for one more scholarship student. Third, Neil Diamond called a family services organization he supported, explaining that he had found an orphan boy who needed immediate placement in a safe home with people who would nurture his musical abilities. All 3 calls ended with people saying yes to whatever Neil Diamond needed. Marcus stood there in shock as this legendary musician arranged his entire future in less than 20 minutes. The orphan boy couldn't believe what was happening, couldn't process that playing Cracklin Rosie had somehow brought Neil Diamond to this exact street corner at this exact moment. Neil Diamond explained that he would personally ensure Marcus got into a good foster home, that the music school would provide a full scholarship including instrument rental and private lessons, and that his attorney would handle all the paperwork to make sure this orphan boy never fell through the cracks of the system again. But Neil Diamond wasn't finished. The legendary musician asked Marcus if he still had that guitar his father gave him. The orphan boy held up the battered instrument with its missing strings and worn frets. Neil Diamond said they needed to get Marcus a proper guitar, one worthy of his talent. They walked together to a music store 6 blocks away, and Neil Diamond bought the orphan boy a beautiful acoustic guitar that cost more than Marcus had ever seen in his entire life. The legendary musician also bought extra strings, a professional tuner, a sturdy case, and instructional books that would help Marcus develop proper technique. The store employees recognized Neil Diamond immediately and watched in amazement as he spent over an hour helping this homeless kid pick out the perfect instrument. The legendary musician tested different guitars, showed Marcus how to hold them correctly, explained what to listen for in tone and resonance. The orphan boy was living a dream he didn't even know he was allowed to have. Neil Diamond paid for everything and told Marcus that this guitar represented a promise. The orphan boy would work hard, stay in school, practice every day, and never give up on his music, no matter what challenges he faced. They sat on a bench outside the music store, and Neil Diamond shared his own story with Marcus. The legendary musician talked about growing up in Brooklyn, about being a lonely kid who found his voice through music, about all the rejection and struggle and years of barely surviving before success finally came. Neil Diamond told this orphan boy that talent matters, but persistence matters more. He said the music industry would be hard, life would be hard, but if Marcus stayed true to his gift and worked harder than everyone else, he could build something beautiful from all this pain. Marcus asked Neil Diamond why he was helping him. The legendary musician got quiet for a moment before answering. He said that 50 years ago, someone gave him a chance when he desperately needed one. A teacher who believed in him. A producer who took a risk on an unknown songwriter. People who saw potential in Neil Diamond when he was just a struggling kid from Brooklyn with a guitar and a dream. The legendary musician said he had spent his entire career trying to pay forward the kindness that others showed him. And when he heard Marcus playing Cracklin Rosie with such raw emotion, he knew this was one of those moments where he was supposed to help. Over the next few weeks, everything Neil Diamond promised came true. The orphan boy was placed with a foster family in Queens who had raised 3 successful musicians and understood the importance of nurturing creative talent. Marcus enrolled in the Manhattan School of Music's youth program on a full scholarship funded by Neil Diamond's foundation. The orphan boy started taking lessons from professional guitarists who were amazed by his natural ability and his hunger to learn everything they could teach him. Neil Diamond stayed in contact with Marcus through phone calls and video chats. The legendary musician would check in every few weeks to see how school was going, how the lessons were progressing, whether the foster family was treating him well. The orphan boy flourished under this attention and support. Marcus went from a scared, homeless kid to a confident young musician who believed he might actually have a future. His grades improved. He made friends. He practiced guitar 4 hours every single day, and his skills developed rapidly under professional instruction. 6 months after that encounter on Fifth Avenue, Neil Diamond invited Marcus to attend one of his concerts at Madison Square Garden. The orphan boy sat in the front row with his foster family, watching his hero perform for 20,000 screaming fans. The legendary musician's voice filled the arena with decades of hits that had touched millions of lives. Marcus watched every moment with total focus, studying how Neil Diamond connected with the audience, how he poured emotion into every lyric, how he made each person feel like the song was written specifically for them. Halfway through the concert, Neil Diamond did something that shocked everyone in that arena. The legendary musician stopped between songs and told the audience about meeting an orphan boy on a New York City street corner 6 months ago. He described hearing Marcus play Cracklin Rosie with such heart and soul that it reminded Neil Diamond why he fell in love with music in the first place. The legendary musician said this kid represented everything beautiful about music, the way it connects people across generations and circumstances, the way it gives hope to those who need it most. Then Neil Diamond invited Marcus onto the stage. The orphan boy's foster parents gently pushed him toward the stairs as 20,000 people applauded. Marcus walked onto that massive stage, carrying the guitar Neil Diamond had bought him, his legs shaking so hard he could barely stand. The legendary musician put his arm around the boy's shoulders and asked the audience to give Marcus a chance to show them what he could do. The orphan boy sat on a stool at center stage, positioned his guitar, and started playing Cracklin Rosie. The arena went completely silent. 20,000 people held their breath as this 12-year-old orphan boy performed Neil Diamond's classic song with a purity and emotion that brought tears to thousands of eyes. Marcus sang about sweet times and good times with a voice that cracked in all the right places, that conveyed genuine feeling instead of technical perfection. The orphan boy played that guitar like it was an extension of his soul, every note ringing clear through the arena's sound system. When he finished, the applause was deafening. Neil Diamond hugged Marcus on that stage and told him in front of everyone that this orphan boy had reminded him what music is really about. It's not about fame or money or playing perfectly. Music is about connection, about expressing what words alone cannot say, about giving voice to the human experience in all its pain and beauty. The legendary musician said Marcus had that gift, and if he nurtured it and worked hard and stayed humble, this orphan boy could touch millions of lives just like that song had touched people for over 50 years. The video of Marcus performing at Madison Square Garden went viral immediately. Millions of people watched the orphan boy play Cracklin Rosie on Neil Diamond's stage, and the comments were overwhelmingly supportive. People praised Neil Diamond for his generosity and kindness. They celebrated Marcus's talent and courage. The story spread across news outlets, talk shows, and social media platforms. Suddenly, this orphan boy who had been invisible sleeping in subway stations was known around the world as the kid who played for Neil Diamond. Opportunities started flooding in. Record labels wanted to sign Marcus. Television shows wanted him to perform. Managers and agents called his foster parents offering representation, but Neil Diamond's attorney had anticipated all of this and helped establish protective boundaries. Marcus was still just 12 years old, still healing from trauma, still learning his craft. The legendary musician advised him to ignore the industry pressure and focus on education and skill development. There would be time for a professional career later if Marcus wanted it, but right now he needed to be a kid who happened to have extraordinary musical talent. Marcus listened to that advice. The orphan boy stayed in school, continued his lessons, practiced relentlessly, and lived a relatively normal life despite the viral fame. His foster family provided stability and love that Marcus had never experienced before. They attended his school concerts, celebrated his progress, and treated him like their own son. The orphan boy finally had a home where he belonged, where his music was valued instead of seen as a distraction, where people invested in his future instead of giving up on him. 2 years passed. Marcus was now 14 years old and had developed into a genuinely skilled musician. The orphan boy could play multiple instruments, had started writing his own songs, and performed regularly at school events and local venues. Neil Diamond checked in regularly, offering guidance and encouragement. The legendary musician had become a mentor and father figure to Marcus, filling a void that had existed since the boy's real father died 9 years earlier. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Neil Diamond flew Marcus and his foster family to Los Angeles. The legendary musician had a recording studio session scheduled and wanted the orphan boy to experience professional music production. Marcus watched in amazement as engineers and producers worked with Neil Diamond to record a new song. The legendary musician explained every part of the process, from laying down tracks to mixing vocals to making artistic decisions about tempo and arrangement. Then Neil Diamond surprised Marcus again. The legendary musician had written a new song specifically about their story, about an orphan boy who played guitar on street corners and found hope through music. Neil Diamond asked Marcus to play rhythm guitar on the recording and to sing harmony vocals on the chorus. The orphan boy could barely believe what was happening. He was 14 years old and recording a song with one of the most successful musicians in history, a song written about his own life. They spent 8 hours in that studio perfecting the track, Neil Diamond pushed Marcus to perform at his absolute best, giving notes and encouragement just like any professional producer would. The legendary musician treated the orphan boy like a real collaborator, valuing his input and celebrating when he nailed difficult parts. When they finally finished, Neil Diamond played back the complete song, and both of them sat in silence, listening to what they had created together. It was beautiful. Neil Diamond announced that all proceeds from the song would go to organizations supporting foster children and music education programs. The legendary musician said Marcus's story had reminded him that there are millions of talented kids falling through society's cracks, children who just need someone to believe in them and give them a real chance. The orphan boy felt overwhelming gratitude that his pain and struggle could now help other kids in similar situations. The song was released 3 months later and became a modest hit, reaching the top 40 on adult contemporary charts. More importantly, it raised over $2 million for foster care and music education charities. Marcus's story reached even more people, and the orphan boy started receiving letters from kids around the world who shared similar experiences. They told him that seeing what he had overcome gave them hope that their situations could improve too. Marcus responded to as many letters as he could. The orphan boy shared encouragement, music recommendations, and practical advice about surviving foster care and pursuing creative dreams. He told them about God's provision, about how one moment of playing Cracklin Rosie on a street corner had changed everything, about how they should never give up even when life feels impossibly hard. The orphan boy became an inspiration to thousands of children who desperately needed to believe that better days were possible. By age 16, Marcus had become an accomplished musician, ready to make real career decisions. The orphan boy had graduated high school early, been accepted to Berklee College of Music on a full scholarship, and had several record labels still interested in signing him. Neil Diamond advised him to focus on education first and build a career slowly and sustainably. The legendary musician said the industry would chew up and spit out talented kids who weren't prepared for its pressures, but someone with solid training and maturity could have a long, successful career. Marcus took that advice and enrolled at Berklee. The orphan boy spent 4 years studying music theory, composition, production, and business. He continued writing songs, performing locally, and building a small but dedicated following. Marcus stayed grounded by volunteering at youth shelters, teaching free guitar lessons to foster kids, and sharing his story at schools and community centers. The orphan boy never forgot where he came from or the miracle that saved him from a life on the streets. During his junior year at Berklee, Marcus released his first independent album. The collection of 12 original songs told his story through music, from losing his father to surviving foster care to meeting Neil Diamond to finding hope and purpose. Critics praised the album's emotional honesty and musical sophistication. The orphan boy had developed a unique style that blended folk, rock, and soul influences into something fresh and authentic. The album sold moderately well and established Marcus as an artist worth watching. Neil Diamond attended Marcus's first major concert as a headliner. The legendary musician sat in the audience at a Boston venue, watching the orphan boy he had discovered 7 years earlier command the stage with confidence and skill. Marcus performed his original songs for a sold-out crowd that sang along to every word. Between songs, the orphan boy told stories about his journey and thanked Neil Diamond publicly for saving his life. The legendary musician stood and waved to the crowd, visibly moved by how far Marcus had come. After the show, they talked backstage for hours. Neil Diamond told Marcus how proud he was, how the orphan boy had exceeded every expectation and become not just a talented musician, but a good human being who used his platform to help others. Marcus thanked Neil Diamond for seeing potential in a homeless kid when everyone else saw just another throwaway child. The orphan boy said that one act of kindness had created ripples that would extend for generations, because every kid Marcus helped would go on to help others in turn. Today, Marcus Johnson is a successful recording artist with 3 albums, multiple awards, and a loyal fan base. The former orphan boy headlines concerts, appears on major talk shows, and collaborates with legendary musicians who respect his talent and his story. But Marcus never forgot his roots. He established a foundation that provides instruments, lessons, and scholarships to foster children with musical talent. The Orphan Boy funds programs in 20 states, helping hundreds of kids every year access the same opportunities that Neil Diamond provided him. Marcus still plays Cracklin Rosie at every concert. The Orphan Boy always dedicates it to Neil Diamond and explains how that song changed his life on a New York City street corner when he was 12 years old. Audiences love hearing the story, and many people have told Marcus that his journey inspired them to help struggling kids in their own communities. The ripple effects continue spreading year after year. Neil Diamond and Marcus remain close. The legendary musician attends Marcus's concerts whenever he can, offers advice on career decisions, and celebrates every milestone like a proud father. Their relationship has become one of the music industry's most heartwarming stories, proof that generosity and kindness can transform lives in ways that fame and fortune never could. What do you think you would have done if you heard a talented kid playing music on the street? Would you have stopped to listen or walked past like everyone else? Share your thoughts in the comments because your perspective matters. This orphan boy went from homeless to headlining concerts because one person chose to stop, to listen, and to help. That's the power of paying attention to people others ignore. Marcus's story reminds us that talent exists everywhere, even in the most unlikely places, but talent alone isn't enough without opportunity and support. The orphan boy had the gift, but Neil Diamond provided the chance to develop it. That combination created something beautiful that continues impacting lives around the world. Think about the people in your community who might need someone to believe in them. What if your attention and support could change their entire trajectory? The next time you see a street performer, really listen. The next time you encounter a struggling kid, really see them. You might not be Neil Diamond with resources to change lives dramatically, but you can still make a difference through encouragement, connection, and caring enough to help however you can. That's what this orphan boy learned from the legendary musician who stopped to listen to Cracklin Rosie on a busy New York City street. Marcus teaches this lesson to the foster kids he mentors. The former orphan boy tells them that God puts people in their paths for reasons they might not understand immediately. But those divine appointments can change everything if they're brave enough to seize the moment. He reminds them that one song, one conversation, one person who cares can be the difference between giving up and building a beautiful future. What's your biggest takeaway from Marcus and Neil Diamond's story? How does it change the way you think about helping others or pursuing your own dreams despite difficult circumstances? Leave your answer below, because these conversations inspire people who need hope right now. This orphan boy proved that your current situation doesn't determine your future, that one moment of courage can open doors you never imagined, and that kindness from strangers can literally save lives. Remember Marcus Johnson the next time you feel like giving up on your dreams. Remember that the orphan boy was homeless, alone, and invisible until he played Cracklin Rosie for the one person who would change everything. Remember that Neil Diamond could have walked past like thousands of others did, but he chose to stop, to listen, to care, and to act. That choice created a miracle that continues blessing people years later. That's the kind of impact one person can have when they let compassion guide their actions instead of convenience.